Hi, everyone. My name's Sharon Malik, and I'm the head of content marketing here at MHC. Thank you so much for joining our webinar today about AI and customer communications, where to draw the line. Please note that this is going to be a recorded webinar, and you'll receive a follow-up email with a link to the recording. In addition, everyone on the line will be muted. So if you have any questions, at the very end, we're going to have a slide that shows how you can contact us and reach out to discuss any of those things. And we look forward to hearing from you in that way. All right, before I introduce our speaker, let me first introduce MHC. We are headquartered in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and 2001 was the year MHC was established and became a pioneer in document automation, automating the generation of critical business documents, for vendor documents, for employee documents, and of course, customer communications. We have over 1,300 global customers across 50 countries with over 100 integrations to other enterprise business systems. And most importantly, we have a satisfied and loyal customer base. We have over 40% of our customers being with us over 15 years, as well as excellent peer reviews on G2. So check us out. In terms of our MHC Northstar CCM solution, it empowers non-technical business users to create and manage customer communications with AI-driven speed and precision. So please check out our website to learn more and reach out with any questions. But that leads us to today's topic, and it's about the benefits and areas of caution when using AI in CCM. So, without further ado, to introduce our speaker, Andy Young, who is the founder and principal analyst at Treeline Research, as well as recently adding a new role as partner at DNOW US. And in both roles, he's focused on helping service providers navigate the transition to digital strategies. So Andy, we're pleased to have you here today speaking on this important topic. Over to you.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Sharon, and a special thank you to the MHC automation team for having me on today. I absolutely appreciate the opportunity to discuss AI's impact on customer communications. I've spent my entire career in the CCM space working with organizations and print service providers as they transition from print-based workflows to digital-first strategies and interactive communications. And obviously, the impact of artificial intelligence is profound. It has many advantages, but it also, as you mentioned, has many challenges. And in fact, in just about every application, you could probably say that same thing. So AI is rapidly changing the way we create, manage, deliver customer communications. And so while its potential is absolutely enormous, particularly in its role in the production and delivery of high integrity regulated communications like we get from our financial statements, insurance policies, healthcare notices, et cetera, these require a very careful and responsible approach. So when I first started talking to you, to the MHC team, I was sort of challenged when asked to do a webinar around the topic of AI because it is such a massive and important topic. But in our conversations, the theme of this talk today really became obvious, and it was really about how we talk about it, think about, implement AI needs careful consideration. Where do you draw the line? So over the next couple of minutes, we're going to explore both the opportunities and the risks of AI, discuss how businesses, especially those in the customer communications as a service or print service provider space, can responsibly carve out a space for AI tools and processes to shine while maintaining compliance and accuracy and trust. So before we dive into the topic, let's just first acknowledge why AI is such a game changer in customer communications. And I think this is, we all see this across all industries. But in this case, around customer communications, AI is really optimizing document production. It's enabling more automation, streamlining print production processes, improving business outcomes. So AI is unlocking all kinds of new efficiencies and enhancing how businesses interact with their customers, driving improved customer experience, for example. But there is a fundamental question, and that is, do we trust artificial intelligence? And the answer in reality is no, not 100%, not yet. And for me, it is this question of trust, but it's really more than that. It's really about predictability and accountability. We need assurance that we have a total understanding of the process and the expected outcomes. And that's where the challenge of trust lies, in my view. So how do we harness the power of AI while maintaining control that's necessary for critical, high-stakes customer communications? To get a sense of that, we're going to start with a quick poll. And we're going to ask how your organization is currently using AI in customer communications. And I'm real curious to see the response we get here. So we'll give you just a couple of minutes to pick one of those. As you might have guessed, there's no wrong answers here. Just trying to get a sense of how you and your organization view AI in customer communications. So Haley, were we getting some input?
Yeah, we're getting some responses.
All right. So while here we go. Content generation. That, frankly, that's what I expected would come out on top. And that makes sense because AI has a lot of applications in content, streamlining, rationalization, tone, branding. There's a lot of things happening on the content side of customer communications. And I think this is a really important distinction because as I continue the talk today, we're going to talk about how those things that are occurring sort of much further upstream outside of the production and delivery of these communications and how they're different. Again, we're drawing some lines here in terms of the overall production workflow process. So let's dig into that a little bit. So where do you draw the line? And for me, this is all about context. Context is everything. And I wanted to highlight a statement that I heard from the CEO of one of the largest core banking system vendors in the world, as he stood in front of an audience of, I'm going to guess, somewhere around 12,000 customers and said, we are using AI in every way possible to improve our capabilities and better serve you. And this really struck me. It's a powerful statement, but it raises a really important question that if AI is being used in every possible way, how do we ensure it's not making unauthorized or incorrect decisions? And I think in the context of this comment in front of this audience, it was really about using AI to interact with them as customers to provide better support and interaction from a sales and product perspective. I don't think he was really talking about, hey, we're going to stick AI inside of the core engine of our core banking systems just yet, right? So again, context is super important. AI can be a force multiplier, but in high stakes environments like financial services, it has to operate within well-defined boundaries and regulations. And one way to illustrate this is, I am not an expert in artificial intelligence, but I do know a little bit something about customer communication. So my expertise is not in AI, but it's in how AI is impacting customer communications. Again, context is really important. So my biggest takeaway for you today from this webinar is when you start hearing AI being mentioned within the realm of customer communications, you need to be asking when, where, how is it being applied? Context is really important. Where you draw the line is really important. So again, let's just talk a little bit about where AI is adding a lot of value in the customer communications production and delivery, but we'll get into a little more broadly conversation about that as well. I think of artificial intelligence as a coach. I recently engaged a business coach and she said to me, Andy, I can provide insights, I can provide options, I can tell you my input, but you still have to make the decision. And I think of AI in that way. It is there as an extra set of eyeballs to give us additional insight and options and help us explore things, possibilities we maybe didn't know exist. But I think in terms of how AI is actively transforming the customer communication space, it comes down to, I think, these four areas that most of us are probably familiar with, and that's around production and delivery. I mean, AI certainly is providing a lot of enhancement in production workflows, particularly around print production, print manufacturing, where it's automating quality control, not just of the output, but of the mechanisms of the systems that are actually involved in that manufacturing process. AI can bring a lot of value in new customer boardings and new applications, not only in the implementation of those, but the testing of those. It can sometimes take weeks or months off of those types of projects. So it's a huge time saver. data handling and personalization. And I want to carve this particular topic out, especially because for this particular presentation, we're talking about critical regulated customer communications, transactional communications coming from banks, insurance companies, healthcare providers. And these communications by default are personalized. But when we talk about AI being used around like engagement, for example, more in a more direct marketing or sales perspective, AI brings all kinds of power to adjusting messaging and looking at brand consistency and tone. I had often thought maybe I should display a customer journey map because I think it would be real important to sort of see where AI fits along a customer journey, for example. So keep that in mind when we talk about personalization. I think it has different context when we're talking about direct marketing, direct mail activities versus those that are transactional. Regulatory compliance is only getting more complex. We've seen how different regulations have come from Europe to the United States that are starting to show up at various levels of different states. Managing these is only going to get more complex. We are going to be relying on AI to help us manage that, to make sure that we're following the rules, so to speak, and preventing fraud and making sure that compliance and we're staying up to date with things as they evolve. And then, of course, delivery optimization. And this sort of falls into more of the bucket of what I'll call customer experience or preference management. Has a lot to do with driving digital adoption and helping customers see the benefit of transitioning from, say, paper and mail communications to digital experiences and interactive communications. So the key thing here is that AI provides a wealth of improvements and efficiencies. It can help us reduce costs, but only when these things are done responsibly. So again, where do you draw the line? Just want to stop real quickly and just explore a simple use case. And that is using AI to drive a paper suppression program. And in this case, we have a fictitious company that wanted to reduce their print and mail volume while maintaining all of the required compliance in doing so. And AI in this example could be used to analyze customer engagement. It could be looking at access to digital statements, mobile app usage, transcripts from call centers to identify sentiment, payment histories. All kinds of information could be gathered about that customer to then make a suggestion or determination of which customers would be best suited for us to approach about transitioning from paper and mail to more of a digital experience. And the AI engine could suggest things like the message that's delivered, the tone of that message, the timing of that message, the channel or the method that message is communicated over. So it could offer all kinds of benefits that may help appeal to that customer in helping them agree to make that change in terms of consenting to receive more digital experiences and communications rather than paper and mail. And of course, the result of this could be a significant cost savings in the print and mail activities, saving the bank millions, and doing all of that in a way that meets disclosure requirements, for example. But there is a risk, right? What happens if AI does something wrong, misclassifies a customer, or fails to send a required statement? This is why oversight and governance and compliance is so critical when you start thinking about using AI. So I wanted to stop. We're going to spend some time on this slide, and this slide is really kind of a much more practical operational view of what's really happening when we talk about the creation, production, and delivery of critical customer communication. So this is sort of a top-down view, and this is in many ways how MHC and their North Star CCM platform would really sort of sit here in the middle, digesting information, really sort of being in that middle of all of the things that are occurring, orchestrating which channel, collecting data, collecting forms, managing composition, outputting to a print service provider, for example. And you could probably guess that every one of the elements on this screen have some level of AI activity or a vendor that's developing tools or capabilities incorporating AI in everything that you see here on this screen. And there's a lot of automation occurring. And I wanted to spend just a minute on this because like I said, I spend a lot of time working with print service providers, and it's my background. And, I think there's a really important distinction that needs to be made between automation in this context and the use of artificial intelligence. Because there's a lot of things happening here that are moving very quickly. One of the things that's happening is these aren't just really critical communications, but they tend to be happening in very, very high volume. So there's a lot of things happening all at once. And automation, we've been doing a lot of work around automation for years, but it's really just that predefined set of rules that say, if this happens, then do this, right? We used to talk about lights out production. You literally push a button and stand back and it runs. And that's really what automation gives you. But the problem is what happens when there's an exception, when there's an error, when that automation, something happens where an expected input or some expected activity was supposed to occur and it doesn't. This is where I think a lot of people can say, well, hey, we can put AI on that to make a decision. And I think that's where things get challenging, right? Because the automated workflow system is generally very locked down, very well understood exactly what's going to happen when and where. But now if you introduce AI into this to make a decision, all of a sudden you have a small amount of unpredictability, which becomes a really big challenge in these kinds of environments where, the saying goes, I had a customer at one time, and they probably, if you hear this statement, they have a big sign on their wall that said 99% correct is 100% wrong. And these types of communications, bad things happen when mistakes are made. And so leaving those decisions up to an AI engine can be problematic. I'm not saying it can't happen, but it can be problematic, and it can cause a lot of heartburn for auditors and customers that are in these critical spaces like financial services, for example. So PSPs play a really important role here, and they sort of represented here in this box around sort of that traditional taking pre-composed content out of a core system, say as PDF or AFP files, bringing those in, producing them, putting them then to the mail stream or emailing or whatever they would traditionally do. But we're starting to see PSPs starting to participate in a lot more of these activities around composition, around managing inbound communications coming from the customer, integrating data from multiple different sources, including sort of non-traditional data sources that typically would have been maybe part of the MarTech stack, as opposed to the traditional CCM, legacy CCM environment of the past. So all of these things are sort of occurring in concert. And when AI is introduced to them, you've got to be super careful of what you're doing and where you're doing it. So again, the challenge, AI lacks sort of that rigid predictability that we get from pure automation, which makes the governance of AI super critical. So where are we drawing the lines? Where are we drawing these buckets around different things that are happening in this process in terms of locking down where AI is involved? So whether you're producing critical communications in-house or you're working with an outside service provider, sort of doesn't matter. The rules are the rules and they apply the same. And we know there are a lot of benefits to AI and customer communications, but again, what are those risks? What are those things that if we're operating as a PSP or we're a customer of one that we should be thinking about when the topic of artificial intelligence comes up? So for this, we're going to jump into our next poll question. So Haley, if we could bring that up. So what are your biggest areas of concern when using AI in customer communications? Okay, no wrong answers here. All right. It's always exciting to see what comes in on top. So Haley, hopefully we're getting some responses here. All right. Well, we know that whatever comes out on top, all of these are true risks. Again, there's no right or wrong answer to any of these. So all of these could be challenges when implementing AI, particularly again in that customer communications as a service, as a third-party print service provider or other provider that's sort of that intermediary between a big bank, an insurance company, and the customer. So Haley, I don't know if, did we get any responses? Oh, here we go. Data security. Yeah. Okay. Again, predicted result. Everybody's concerned about security, as they should be. Core systems and security tend to be number one or number two always in just about everything you would ask. But then you've got accuracy and compliance risks that are right in there as well. So we had data security at 46% and accuracy at 54%. So it's this idea of the making sure it's secure and making sure that it's accurate. So I think we know, based on that we know that AI introduces some risks in customer communications, particularly in this realm of, we've done all of the work sort of upfront in terms of streamlining content. Now we actually have a communication that has to be produced and delivered. So looking at this from an outsourcing third-party delivery perspective, one of the leading reasons why enterprises, big banks, and insurance companies look to PSPs for help in outsourcing is that they're experts in managing data. They're experts in compliance. They're experts in complexity. And they can help their customers get to a higher level of communications more quickly, perhaps, than maybe doing that in-house. And in this context, AI becomes very tempting, right? These are service providers that are in the business of making a profit. So the faster they can do things, the more efficient they can output content, means there's more profit. And I think everyone sees AI sort of in this same way, whether it's in the customer communications business or any other. But for all the reasons we previously discussed, it can add a lot of value, insights, and possibilities, but there's some big buts, right? And again, there's sort of 4 buckets of concern that we've already talked about in the survey. But anytime that AI is touching customer data, we got to be thinking really careful. It was interesting. I was on a panel recently, and we had a consultant, we had a customer, and we had a print service provider, and they each had very, very different views of how AI was playing out in their customer communications workflow. And it was the print service provider that basically stood up and said, no, in our environment, inside of our sealed off box, lockdown box in our environment, we don't allow AI, we don't allow it in. And for this primary reason, the concern of data privacy and security. So anytime we're talking about AI handling customer sensitive data, it's a real challenge. It's also a challenge because print service providers, these third-party communication services firms, tend to be a real vector for bad actors that are looking for customer data because they've got a lot of it. So it is a complex and highly secure environment where AI sort of introduces, again, an additional element of sort of the unknown that has to be managed. So along with that, again, is this idea of predictability. How do we know that it's doing the right thing, right? Accuracy and integrity. AI generated content could omit critical financial details, leading to compliance violations. And these are bad things, right? Nobody wants that. And these entire operations are set up to avoid that occurring. So introducing AI all of a sudden opens the door just a tiny bit to perhaps some unpredictability and uncertainty. Record keeping, which we're going to talk about here in just a minute, becomes a really big deal because people want to know. They're asking the question, what are you doing with AI? How is AI being used? And you better have a good answer, right? Everything's got to be documented. Everything's got to be transparent. Everything's got to be auditable. And not only that, but you have to maintain sort of that level always, because you want to know, has anything changed? As the AI engine learned something new that we didn't know about, that it picked up a bad habit, for example. So along with that, you could get things like biased decision makings, where certain groups of customers could be segmented out for unknown reasons that could create perhaps some compliance and some discrimination types of issues. So AI engines are about learning. And if they learn something bad or learn something that is inappropriate or we're not aware of, they could be doing things that we're not sure what the result's going to be. So the good news is these risks can be managed, right? But it requires a really proactive compliance and governance measures. So again, looking at this from a PSP or a customer of a PSP, a print service provider, a communication service provider, somebody that is delivering these communications as a service, how do we mitigate all these risks? And what does a responsible AI governance look like? And one of the things that's again, when we go back to that sort of that top-down view, is the more of those functions that a service provider takes on, it's just a big snowballing effect in terms of if we start doing composition or managing interactive inbound communications, all of this, if you're using AI, is going to apply. So very robust audit trails, right? Every AI driven decision has to be documented and explainable. You've got to be able to tell a customer, this is the result we expect, and we can prove that this is the result that we're going to get. This is just going to add, again, this new layer of complexity and reporting for print service providers. And we've already starting to see that companies that previously would have, say, a chief compliant officer as a part of their operation, now are adding chief AI officers, because it's going to require so much attention and focus in terms of answering questions for the auditors and meeting customer expectations. Human oversight, I think we all agree right now that the trust, right, that predictability, that accountability factor is just not 100% there. So I don't think we're allowing AI to replace human decision making. But where it's being used, you're going to have, again, accountability. You're going to have to be able to defend the decisions that process is making on your behalf. And I think people are really sort of weighing whether that is where they want to be in their business right now. Again, we talked a little bit about bias in terms of what could be introduced from an AI perspective. You're going to want to prevent any kind of bad behavior and discrimination that could be introduced into the system. And again, this is all part of explainability, right? Customers are going to ask, auditors going to ask, even if you're not using AI in your environment, they are going to ask you, what are you doing with AI? I've heard it from a number of PSP customers already that they're getting these questions like, hey, we're not using AI. And so now they're almost having to go into the mode of proving that they're not using AI. And so it is going to be a significant challenge. And you're going to need to be proactive in terms of managing it. And of course, cybersecurity, data security, this is not new. It's just AI introduces, again, a new vector, a new layer of complexity to the tool set. So AI really does provide a lot of efficiency, but it is also can be a liability. So finding that balance of positive benefits and outcomes is going to need to be balanced with new costs, overheads, and requirements. Again, sort of going back to the theme of where do you draw the line? So meeting expectations, I think there's a lot here, but I think it really comes down to many of the things that we've already described. It really comes down to reporting and documentation. You've got to be able to, walk the talk. You've got to be able to deliver the information so that your customers, your clients can feel comfortable, secure, knowing that you have got everything locked down from a compliance and assessment perspective, that you've got all the reporting and the data to back up any decisions that have been made. If there are incidents, how are those incidents managed? What was the mitigation factors? How are those things tested and improved? So it's, we're going to have to think about how, again, we have to think about how, if you don't do these things, how you could be exposed to some, regulatory violations. So one other aspect of this, though, is that I want to call out is that if you're not using AI, it could also be to your disadvantage, right? Because everybody's trying to figure out how and where AI is going to be used. So pushing back and saying we're not going to use it could also be detrimental. So it is going to be a challenging balance of figuring out where do we draw that line in terms of where are we going to let AI into that secure environment and where are we going to say no. So AI is not going to go away. We know that it's here to stay. Its performance is increasing exponentially. Thinking about AI, you got to stay on top of it. You've got to be thinking, where does it fit today? Where will it fit tomorrow? Where am I going to draw that line? What's happening in the marketplace from a competitive perspective? but all that has to be done within the confines of what's legal, what meets regulatory compliance requirements. So everything I presented today, it could be outdated in 6 months or 2 years. We don't really know for sure. So this is going to be a topic that is constantly changing and is going to require constant attention by study by all of us to stay on top of it. So just to wrap up here, really what it comes down to is organizations have to define really clear boundaries for how AI is being used. It has to be balanced with efficiency and compliance. You have to find that middle ground. I think you have to assume that AI is being used and be prepared with answers to questions that are going to come. Even if you're not using it in your environment, you're going to be asked to sort of prove out that point. How are you not using AI? Asking it in the negative is probably going to be a question that comes at you. Keep in mind that AI and automation are two different things. They balance each out in many ways. AI drives efficiency, but it's got to be governed, as we've talked about. It's got to be auditable. You've got to have complete transparency and visibility into what's going on. Regulations are going to change, and keeping on top of those are going to be a challenge, but I'm hoping that we get more clarity in this area. It's going to be very dynamic, but it's a space that we're all just going to have to continue to watch very closely. So businesses have to think about, where is this going to be applied? Where can I draw the lines? Where can I create the boundaries, either as a service provider or in your own operational environment? Wherever those boundaries are drawn, they have to be strictly enforced, because bad behaviors can lead to some major issues and major challenges, meaning that human oversight is always going to be essential here. We're always going to have a requirement, at least for now, in my view, to have a human involved in any kind of high stakes decision-making processes. Accountability is critical. Somebody's got to own that process. So lots of exciting stuff coming for all of us. Just remember that when somebody says AI in customer communications, you need to ask yourself, in what context is AI being discussed? How is it being used? And hopefully this is going to lead to better understanding for all of us, greater confidence in AI's ability to harness the transformative power of it in customer communications and continue to improve our lives. So that's what I had for you today. So we're going to wrap up the presentation. If you had any questions about this topic, please reach out to me directly. And if you want to learn more about MHC or their CCM, their North Star CCM solution, you can connect with them through the QR code on your screen. Thank you very much for your time today, everyone. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, and thank you so much, Andy, for your insights. This is a very interesting, complex topic, but we're all going to be grappling with it, and I really appreciate what you've shared today. Thank you also to our attendees. The topic of our March webinar is going to be how smarter document automation reduces or lightens the IT workload by empowering business users to manage their communications and workflows independently. And we really hope you'll tune in. It's happening March 19th. It's hosted by our own CCM product manager, Sean Phillips. And you can use the QR code on the screen to get more details and to register. So we really hope you'll do that. And as you go, just please be reminded to watch for an email with a link to the recording today. And please, if you see a short survey as you exit, do take a moment to complete it. Thank you, Andy. Thank you, Haley, for your contributions. And thank you all for attending. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.